Good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. We're so glad you're here. Episode 119. Rocking along though here on August 26th of 2022 because today we have the fourth and final installment of this series that we've been doing in partnership with MEDC, conceived by the amazing Denise Graves, who will be joining us in just a moment. The Women Who Innovate series. We've been going through talking to women who are mentors, who are different roles in the ecosystem. And today we come to the CEOs. We're joined by two very, very special women today. I'm really looking forward to interviewing them. We won't steal the thunder there. We're going to let Denise introduce them in just a few moments. But before that, I guess because he was on especially good behavior, we let Jeff Rinvelt into the room. Jeff, Renaissance Venture Capital, an advisor to MedTech Crossroads, all-around great guy who always changes his background to meet with the day. All sorts of, Jeff, I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry. We love having you here.
No, thank you very much. I work hard on it, so I appreciate somebody notices it. So thank you, Gene.
We've got the lava lamps. We've got the two-hearted. Jeff, you guys have some really cool stuff coming up with your Undemo Day, the Renaissance Fall 2022 Undemo Day. Tell us all about it. Get us into the details here.
Yeah, the first thing I want to talk about, and I talked a little bit about it last time I was on, but we have the applications for companies that want to present to one-on-one to investors. We still have that application open. We've got a great number of people so far, but there's always room for more because we've got a lot of hungry investors coming to the event. So we want to make sure we have the best and brightest from Michigan. The URL is up there, and it's a pretty short form, but the deadline's coming up in about 2 weeks, September 7th. So this is open to Michigan-based companies that are going to be fundraising in the next 3 to 18 months for an event in person in Ford Field, October 12th. And we usually get about 200 investors coming to it. And we've had some great companies and great deals that sort of come out of that. Usually we get about 10 to 15 deals, actually venture capital investments coming out of these, out of these Undemo days. And we hope to always top that or get more every single time. So free to apply, free to attend, and fairly easy form to fill out. And this is for people that are going from seed to growth rounds in venture capital. We've got, people investing all, pre-seed, all the different rounds basically side of it. So
that's great. I think we have the screen.
Yep.
We can put up full screen here, I think. There's two slides here. Here's the first one that you've been talking through. Applications close September 7th. Jeff, you had been telling me in a previous week that this is for people who, you got to be ready to know that you're going there, you're selling a part of your company, but if you know how to build your pitch deck and you're ready to take that step, this is an appropriate place to be.
Yep. Again, if you want to go to the next slide, we actually do have, companies that are coming that aren't, ready to pitch, but just want to sort of talk to investors, network with investors, or see what investors, other companies look like that are investable. So this is also for community members. We have a lot of great people. The entrepreneurial support organizations usually show up, investors show up, our limited partners show up, and all of our general partners and people in our ecosystem sign up. So if you're in that group, or if you're a startup that basically is just talking to people, this is the way to attend. And we just put that up. So basically that URL is up again. It's in Ford Field, sort of 1 to 5 p.m. Free to attend. And the other thing I want to plug is close to Jen Baird and I's side of it is Michigan Tech Week's actually going on right after this. And so we're making a full day. If you want to spend a couple days downtown Detroit, basically seeing the best and brightest in Michigan, this is a good way to sort of see everything.
That's really cool. I've heard from a number of people saying, hey, I'm going to be in Michigan for Michigan Tech Week. So this is really, it's really picking up, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, the response has been great. And we know this fall is very busy for everybody. So we're excited that everybody's, a lot of people are getting great response, and we're trying to make the most bang for the buck for people. So, spend a half a day, spend a day, and we can basically show you Michigan. That's
awesome. Jeff, we're really excited about that. Now, I think there was one more item of business, and I think it was something that Denise had mentioned. It was, if you're going to come on this day of Women Who Innovate, you got to tell us something about data on investing in women-led tech. The two women we're going to be interviewing, millions and millions of dollars raised between the two of them. Your perspective on this. You invest in a lot of funds that may have invested in these two women. Give us your thought as we launch into this.
Yeah, I mean, this has always been a focus, a passion of mine, and especially Patty Glazer, basically on the board of the MBCA. We've done a really good, basically collecting data, and we keep trying to, get more and more data back on that. But last year it was still only 13% of the CEOs getting funding in Michigan were women. That's better than the national average, but that is not even close, basically, to the average of the population. So it should be actually probably tilted the other way, where it's over 50%. So the good news is we're seeing is, the Undemo Day we did before this in the spring, we saw a number of great women, CEOs or founders, basically, side of it. And, we basically just have to keep highlighting and keep sort of pounding that message through. I'll comment is it's actually worth sort of in the investor side of things. And I think that's probably part of the problem is we don't have enough people as VCs or as seed investors, as angels investors that, they'll basically be much more open to women as CEOs and as founders. So I think we need to correct our own house before it actually translates into the CEOs and the founder side of things. But I'm sure we're going to get a great opinion, and Denise and Jen and Elke can sort of correct me on all these things. So.
All right, so we'll hear their opinions on that. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us. Good to see you as always, my friend.
Perfect. Thank you guys, and I'll look forward to hearing what everybody else has to say. See ya.
Well, and that brings us to the main event, and none other than the inimitable Denise Graves to introduce this, our last installment of Women Who Innovate. Denise, welcome back.
Hi, Gene. Thank you for having me again. Very excited to be here on this fourth and final webinar in this great topic. So appreciate you humoring me and playing host to these conversations. It's been fantastic.
I thought you were humoring me, so this is, I love it. And what the lineup today, Jen Baird, the CEO of Fifth Eye, Elke Lipka, CEO of TSRL, both ladies that you've brought here for today's discussion. Give us a little bit of an introduction and a little flow leading up to where we are today in the shows that we've done.
Of course. So, when we talked about having a webinar series, I've done these in my past life, and I love stringing together a conversation or a topic to present ideas and thoughts and different ways to do things. So this one came about when we wanted to highlight all the great things that are going on in the state of Michigan when it comes to women who are in the innovation space. So when you think about that path through innovation, you start with, as we started with, researchers and clinicians who are working on bringing technologies to market. And then we layered on top of that the women who are working within those institutions, whether it be the hospital system or the universities, who are helping women get their technologies to market and having a great understanding of the process in which to do that and the intellectual property, and wrapping around those women opportunities for funding and mentorship. And then following that, we brought in a few mentors who support those technologies and getting to market, work closely with the technology transfer and innovation offices at the universities and our hospital systems. And then finally today, women who have been there and done that, who are CEOs working with companies that may have been startups out of a university or conceived of from an idea in the marketplace. So, today's conversation will be with Elke and Jen that will tell us a little bit about their stories and the pros and cons, if you will, of being a CEO of a fast-paced, high-tech innovation, and what we might want to look for, and how others can aspire to do the same thing that they're doing.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll appreciate your leadership in putting this together, Denise. We're going to do something fun next year. I don't know what it's going to be, but hopefully to follow up on this. And join me now as we welcome Jen Baird and Elke Lipka to the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're
Thank you.
So honored that you would agree to be here. As I alluded to Jeff, between the two of you, I didn't count how many millions of dollars you have both raised for these efforts. Clearly at the top of your game. Just by way of minor introduction here. And then you guys are going to tell us about your stories here, but Dr. Lipka joined TSRL in 2007 to develop and implement a sustainable, competitive commercialization strategy for TSRL's technology portfolio. She became the majority owner of the company and its CEO in 2018. You can tell us more about your path to get there, Dr. Lipka. And of course, Jen Baird, CEO of Fifth Eye, creators of the AHI system, which she founded as a spin-out from the University of Michigan. And Jen has raised over 16 million in venture and strategic funding, secured multiple FDA clearances, and deployed the system in multiple hospitals across the U.S. It's quite a thing to say after just a few short years of doing that company, Jen. And also, Jen, thank you for your support. You've always been a big supporter of MedTech Crossroads. We've appreciated that. And a fellow lover of education. You're always posting blog posts. Tell people where they can find that. We should do this at the end, but we're just going to tell them right now.
Sure. My COVID project was to figure out how to share more about what I learned, because I love talking to other entrepreneurs, and COVID kind of put a damper on that. So I started writing a blog at www.startupceoreflections.com, or frankly, if you say blog Jen Baird, you'll find the same thing. And I'm now, I think, 2 years in, every week, posting about what I've been learning and thinking about, and trying to capture 20 years of experience as I'm on my 5th startup now, Gene, and it's over 75 million these days raised, and keep going. I can't quite I get over doing this stuff, which is kind of crazy, but it's in my blood.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I'd like you each, and we'll start with Dr. Lipka, to dive in so that people get a sense of what it is you currently do. You've each had long careers. I want in a minute to go to how you got to where you are today, to trace that path, because every path is so unique and it's so interesting. And as I said before the show, one of the demographics that we really want to support here is young women who may, in their own minds, have not thought that this was possible, right? And yet here you are sitting in front of us with these long and very successful careers, having these raises behind you that are just frankly incredible. And so we're going to go there to what journey did you take? What problems did you run into? What sorts of solutions did you come up with along the way? But for right now, starting with Dr. Lipka, describe to us your current position and what you're doing so we get a sense of what your day-to-day is like right now.
All right, thank you, Jane. Yeah, so I run what we call a preclinical accelerator in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're a company that we took ownership, management took ownership of in 2018, and we really diversified the number of people that we're working with across the U.S. and even with inventions from outside the U.S. Our most advanced technology actually is a microneedle patch that comes from Queen's University in Northern Ireland. And so we're not a typical startup, we're a portfolio company. So we're really filling a void to help evaluate and vet technologies before they're really ready for a startup company. And we've done that very successfully with the help of non-dilutive SBIR funding. And we're typically, for the microneedles, we've raised over $7 million for just that program to chaperone it through preclinical development, and then decide, is it ready for a startup company? And we will form portfolio companies that essentially hold the intellectual property and the regulatory package. So I feel it's a really effective way to get to a point where you can say there's really an opportunity for a drug product, and not start a startup when you just don't have enough information and data to really make that decision quite yet, even if the market is very attractive. And so a lot of day-to-day activities are still labs and science, grant writing, talking to strategic partners, talking to new inventors that have some ideas, and analyzing both the commercial potential and the technical feasibility of these concepts.
It's really fascinating. And just to dive into that for a second, how do new ideas come to your company?
So we'll keep an eye out for tech transfer offices and in the publication space. Have historically been quite focused on infectious disease opportunities, but most opportunities are actually coming in inbound unsolicited, that people kind of hear about our success with the SBIR program, and it's another source of funding for academics that don't want to leave their job and run a startup, and oftentimes it's a quite well-functioning partnership between the talent at the universities and the talent that we have here. The other advantage is, a lot of us were former Pfizer folks here that have been around since the site closed, and we've worked together for 15 years now. We're a very well oiled team. We've leverage this talent across the portfolio so we can keep people that we pay well and fund across usually 3 to 5 projects that are funded at any given time. And it's a very efficient process, and we don't have to hire and rehire people, as things go up and down.
I certainly resonate with that just from a business perspective, because oftentimes the talent can be undervalued when in reality that's where all the knowledge is. Well, kudos to you. It sounds like a really fun business model. I'm sure we'll get more into that as we get to your path and where you've been and what kinds of problems you're getting to solve and work on. As we're giving this overview, though, let's go to Jen. Jen, Fifth Eye, tell us about the company and obviously your role in founding it.
Sure. Fifth Eye is a software medical device startup. So we are regulated by the FDA, spin out from the University of Michigan. Back in 2018, I recruited 3 people out of the University of Michigan, raised some money, and started going through the FDA process and building this FDA product. And then we've actually gone through FDA 3 times and have our current product in the marketplace doing pilots at 3 different health systems across the country now, multiple hospitals. And it's a super exciting time because we're starting to be able to have an impact on both the nursing shortage that you have out there, as well as improving quality of care for patients in a time when our healthcare systems are super, super stressed. That's exciting. And fundamentally, the analytics that are underneath this, so we're a clinical analytics company. This is kind of an amazing thing, and we'll, I'm sure, get into this, Jean, because I find it rather interesting that I am the CEO of a tech company that's also a healthcare company. And when I started this company, I didn't actually know what cloud really meant. I now know really well, but at the beginning I didn't know. And so that's just a little tip for folks is actually every startup that I've started, I didn't really know that much about what we were going to be working on until I started it. So that's a little crazy. But when you have great partners who can teach you along the way, that's super cool. I've raised 17 million for this startup so far. We're well funded into next year, which is exciting. And we are using a machine learning trained static analytic that takes a single lead of EKG, streaming EKG off of a patient, and predicts their likelihood of hemodynamic instability or signs of shock developing in the hospital. And this is the kind of thing that allows doctors and nurses to have a heads up ahead of vital signs that somebody's going in the wrong direction and maybe in time to do something about it. This is exciting to hospitals because it can reduce lengths of stay and increase safety and quality of their care, and provide support to a really overstressed clinical team. So it's a super exciting time to be in the healthcare space. Maybe too exciting at some moments, but this has been a really crazy time launching a product in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, it's going to create a lot of challenges as well as opportunities, like you alluded to the healthcare staffing shortage. So anything you can do to help there has to be a bonus.
Yep.
When we start to talk about pathway, I want to come back to it too, because what you said, I hadn't thought about it before in that light. But if I recall, and you'll correct me here in a second if I'm wrong, but I think Accurate Cytometers, which was one of your early successes, actually started not as a cytometer. It started as something else. But you'll correct me on that one in a minute when we get to the pathway. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Dr. Lipka and talk about this pathway. People look at you today and you're succeeding at this amazing business. When people hear sort of dollar amounts through the door, they wish they could get that much money for their startup, let alone for one idea within the portfolio, like you were alluding to the microneedle thing. I'm sure it hasn't always been just that easy. I'd like you to walk us through what you've been through in your career, the path to where you are today, and sort of help us understand what some of the challenges you encountered were, what some of the solutions you encountered were, how have you overcome whatever some of those unique challenges are. Walk us through that story.
Sure, yeah. So, I've been in this field now close to 30 years. I was born and raised in Germany, and the career path is as much a personal discovery path as it is an intentional plan, right? So when I graduated from high school, I decided with a typical, for that time, probably female mindset, that I would become a pharmacist, because then I could work part-time and have children and have the perfect work-life balance. And so I started out in pharmacy school in Germany, and at the end of your educational period, you have to do a practical year in a pharmacy. And I got the first shock of my life that I could not imagine myself doing this for the rest of my life. And German pharmacies are different than American pharmacies. They're individual businesses, but you also hand everything over the counter. That's OTC. So you're highly educated, but you're mostly shuffling aspirin across the counter. And first learning, you are client facing all day long. And I happen to be an introvert, and that was not a good fit for me. So, if you're stuck in one role, my solution has always been get more education. So I went on to get my PhD. I always followed the people. I could get interested and still can get excited about all kinds of different things. So I followed the people and picked the mentors that I really liked. And so my PhD advisor was a MD PhD in pharmacology, and I specialized in pharmacokinetics. But he also sent me on to work with a professor here at the University of Michigan, basically the day I set foot into the program. So I came to Michigan in '92, was supposed to work here for 6 months with Gordon Amadon at the College of Pharmacy, and the rest is history. I essentially never left. So my work here went really well. I worked well with both my advisor in Germany and Gordon here, and finished my PhD, and then actually got hired into TSRL, got my green card that way, and was on a path in research that I really enjoyed. When I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, Park Davis called me and said they really needed to fill an opening before the end of the year, and if I wanted to interview for that position. So that was in October, and they hired me, and then I went on maternity leave. So again, kind of serendipity, and that was also a good experience. At a small company, you get to do a lot of different things and a lot of problem solving. At a larger company, you get depth in certain areas, right? It tends to be, after a while, quite repetitive, but you get foundation that in certain areas that will become sort of the legs of your stool that you stand on. And so I was there for 4 years till Pfizer acquired us. I left with a package and went back to a startup, which happened to be Aspirion Therapeutics. Got to work on biologics, got to work with that team, which was really exciting, and got acquired by Pfizer again. And decided when the site closed that I was going to stay in the area. Along the way, I had gotten more and more interested in the business side of things. I got my MBA from the University of Michigan, so that is actually my only true Michigan degree. Everything else is from Germany. And started to get more into project management, strategy, business operations and such, and assumed those roles. And then when the site closed, I got hired back into TSR basically for business development. And the job I'm doing now, I basically got because our president at the time who hired me tragically passed away in 2014 of a heart attack. And so basically we were left with, yes, the business development lady has to run the company now. And that's where we took it from that point on. And we had already started to change the business model towards the accelerator. We expedited that further. We built the team and built the portfolio and the collaborators. And that got us where we are today. And a lot of it was really thinking about, what do I really enjoy? What is not good for me? How much time do I need to myself versus interacting with people? And always follow the people, both in terms of who mentors you, who you hire, who you work with every day. The right people can do almost anything.
I heartily agree with that. That's quite an amazing story. Now it's been, I think you said 2014 when you took the company over, so it's been 8 years. That's incredible. I noticed that there weren't really any, didn't notice a single challenge in that story. It was pretty much, don't like the way I'm going there, I'm just going to go change it, and off you went. You got the education, whatever it was. Not every day that somebody hires into a company twice and then ends up running it. That's quite the amazing story. Was there anything that you would focus our minds on in terms of that pathway that you feel like that really stands out? Do you feel like you had the opportunities in front of you and were able to just navigate them? Are there any things that you wish were different, or you wish that society would do differently?
Oh, sure. Yes. What a good lead in, right? And there were some challenges, and challenges probably more that I talked about so far in terms of what challenged me personally. I did feel, and I feel that often with my female colleagues, that we don't ask assertive enough for what we want. And, because the opportunities weren't necessarily presented to me, I really sometimes doggedly went after them. Even the advisor I wanted to work for my PhD, he initially didn't have an opening. And so I was looking to go into another program, but I said, okay, then I work in this horrible pharmacy for another year until I get to that program, because I wanted to do that. And I've heard many, many times throughout my career, you can't do that. That's never going to work, and have noticed that women get often talked to more like about their inabilities to achieve something. And mentoring of men is often more focused on you got to reach higher. You're not reaching high enough, So if you start looking at some of the verbiage, that's a huge challenge to overcome. If your mentors almost sometimes talk to you with a view of doubt, and that's deeply ingrained in our society. That's something we're, in many ways, women even are pretty unaware of, But if you start looking at little things like, we call female politicians by their first name and male politicians by their last names, and you start looking for some of those things, there's always this assumption you can't achieve that, and so that can be quite a challenge, and many times in my life, most notably with a negotiation of taking on the company ownership, because if you run a company on soft money, there's no high valuation there, right? So if you want somebody to run it, you have to give that person the majority ownership, or you do it yourself, and that took, believe it or not, 3 years for a company our size.
Wow. And yet, to what I noticed as you're talking through it, these challenges, while they're there and something that you can put your finger on, it just doesn't even sort of appear in the story the way you tell it, because you did know what you want, went for what you want, and here you are today. I do feel like what you just pointed to is a theme I've seen among the women that we've interviewed that Denise has brought to the series, has been just this sort of dogged, yep, I either know what I want, or I know that this isn't what I want, and I'm going to go find what I want. And it's been a very, very common theme. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Jen, tell us your story. It's been a long one. 5 startups, and some recent challenges not involving the startup world too. Feel free to weave those in as well. But take us through your story.
Well, I was laughing in a positive way, resonating with what you were saying about knowing what you wanted to do, or thinking you knew what you wanted to do in high school. And I think back to high school, and I was really kind of a crazy person. There's 2 things that I remember. First, I decided in high school that I wanted to be a CEO someday. And back when I was in high school, this wasn't nearly as common an ambition as it seems to be today. At the time, this was not even something that you would aspire to back then. That's one thing. The second thing is I skipped foreign languages and instead took computer languages. And I learned things like BASIC and Fortran and COBOL and Pascal. And to this day, I still rely on those experiences. Running a AWS-based tech company, doing event-driven, very cutting-edge tech, which is crazy. It's pretty funny that the things I learned as a neophyte programmer back in high school is the last time I ever programmed anything. And those lessons still apply and I still use them. And this morning when I was discussing with my head of technology about a little React problem that we were having, it's still relevant, which is crazy. I went from there to University of Michigan where I got a psych degree in organizational psych and studied leadership. Advanced on to Northwestern, got my master's in finance and strategy, and started working in banking. Then spent 8 years in management consulting, where I worked on operations improvement, people, process, technology kinds of stuff before in 2001 when I jumped into the high potential startup realm. And I worked with a company, the first, actually it was funny. I had a choice when I moved to Ann Arbor. I could go work for Pfizer in their strategy department, or I could go work for a startup. And at the time, I had been working with Fortune 100 companies, and I decided I was going for the startup because I like the smaller companies better. So we might have overlapped in some way at some point, but I opted out and went for startup land, and I've been there ever since. I did do a internship in college with one of our local venture funds. And really learned that I loved the perspective of startups and being able to look at the whole company and think about the whole company and what was all those pieces. Now, the crazy thing is, the first startup that I was part of, I spent 15 months learning everything not to do in a startup. Examples of things not to do. Do not have a small startup and say to the funders, I need a $100 million pre-money valuation. It's not a good plan. What do you think about that, Denise? Don't do that. I learned a lot about integrity in that process. And then I started, I got involved with a entrepreneur, inventor, tremendous inventor, and we started a company called Synetics Ultrasound. Then about a year later, we started the work on accuracy cytometers, what would become accuracy cytometers. And Jean, your memory is correct. We looked at some technology from University of Michigan. We looked at 3 potential opportunities for that. And the third one was actually a flow cytometer. The first 2 was detecting biocontamination of metalworking fluids. And the second opportunity was some kind of water testing application. And we ultimately ended up in doing flow cytometry because it was a opportunity to do something better, faster, and cheaper than what the market leaders were doing by kind of really radically reinventing flow cytometry. And that proved to be a very successful company. It took us about 3 years to build the product and another 3 years to take it global. And ultimately it was sold for $205 million. So that was an exciting run. After that, and by the way, when we started that flow cytometry company, I didn't know what a flow cytometer was. So going back to that theme of Jen doesn't necessarily know what she's getting herself into all the time. This is one of the barriers lots of people look for in there. I think there is some value in having deep understanding, but that actually hasn't been my path. My path has leaned in heavily to the fact that I learn really fast. And I had that diverse background as a management consultant where I'd worked in, 25 different companies doing 35 different projects over the span of 8 years. And I had all these patterns of what makes a good company to draw from. So that makes it easier, I think, for me to enter into places that I don't know. And by the way, innovative startups are by definition places that you don't know. Sometimes I think the problem is you know too much. And that means you're blocked in with assumptions. But you do have to learn, and you have to learn quickly. So I jumped from flow cytometry, life science tools, into doing offshore wind energy, renewable energy. And by the way, turbine-free wind energy, so no blades. Instead, we were separating electrons from their protons and trying to generate electricity that way. Now, worked on that project for 8 years. And at the end of the day, the market moved and our technology did not advance as much as we would like. And I had to make the hard decision and convince a lot of people to shut it down, which I did in 2017. And at the same time, started looking for kind of what's the next thing there. And went back to my favorite hunting grounds, University of Michigan. Looked at like a dozen different opportunities and inventors and connecting with people looking for the next thing. And I knew I loved healthcare. I loved healthcare because of the positive impact it has on people's lives. And that has always been a motivator for me. I did some stints in insurance. I did stints, with in finance. I did a number of different stints. And what I learned is I really care about how something impacts people. And that's why I kind of find myself keep coming back to science and healthcare, because that is a place where you really can impact people's lives. I don't I had a number of opportunities to join companies that were doing apps of various sorts. And I just couldn't get excited because I'm like, it doesn't make the world a better place at the end of the day. I cannot pour my life into this. But I did find this technology, and there were several different things that I looked at, but I found this one, and the day, I remember distinctly the moment that it was like, if this is true, if what this team is telling me is true, this blows everybody else out of the water. Now I'm going to spend a month going and talking to potential users and prove to myself that the inventors have not drunk the Kool-Aid, and that indeed the users are convinced that this is or potential users, that this is something that would make a difference. And I heard over and over and over again, this is amazing. This is holy grail territory. Hospitals are hard as hell. And those three themes were really strong. But I started working with the university. You asked for challenges. We happened to intersect at the moment when the university was trying to figure out how they were going to handle data. And so we became the poster child of them thinking through that process, which then took 9 months to actually get a license done, because we had to have a data use agreement along with it. And the university was not in a place where they had a good understanding of that. And so that was a really difficult process. And kudos to the Office of Tech Transfer, who did an amazing job of helping navigate that and getting us there. But then I raised our first money. The team came out of the university, and we started building a product. And honestly, we went through some interesting challenges. We, built our first prototype and realized that the architecture was not going to scale. So we got a new tech team that was able to bring some huge amounts of expertise in how do you build something that is super scalable. And we learned about the FDA. So here's another one of those learning, master skill things. I mean, and this, if I can say something, I'm going to say it really strongly. My master skill is I can learn fast. And that means I can do a lot of different things. I remember vividly, one of my co-founders was like, we were sitting looking at each other, okay, what's the next most important thing? He's like, somebody's got to get this FDA thing figured out. And I'm like, he looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, I think it should be you. And I said, okay. And I think maybe a few weeks later, I might have called Eugene to have a conversation about this FDA thing. And I've now visited the FDA multiple times, managed to get through the FDA process. We got a de novo granted. We got 2 additional 510Ks after that. And sad to say, I am the resident expert of the FDA in the entire company to this day. And we now hired just a few months ago a regulatory and quality person who is coming up to speed. But that is, that is the kind of thing that you have to do in a startup. I mean, I had to learn about how do you manage experimental physicists and theoretical physicists to do wind energy. And how do you even think about that? What does biological sciences look like for flow cytometry? And now I've had to learn all about how, hospital operations work, how machine learning works, how to have streaming data in the cloud. And we just got last week HITRUST certified for our analytic, which means that we got a top scale information security certification that is designed for data centers, like physical data centers. And for those out there who know these terms, we are doing something that's totally serverless, which means when they say, how do you secure your servers, we have to say things like, we don't have any servers, like none. We don't have a single server in the whole company. And believe me, when you're trying to, meet 13485 and all these requirements, they don't know how to compute the fact that you don't actually have servers. So that took some enormous amounts of finesse. So those have been some of the kinds of things that you have to tackle if you're innovating. We're way ahead of where lots of the environments that we're in know how to be. And so we have to help people understand why their assumptions aren't right. And one of the interesting things with Fifth Eye is we use a streaming ECG that measures the electrical signals from your heart. ECG is typically used to measure heart arrhythmias. So everybody says, oh, ECG, you must want to talk to the cardiologist. Actually, the cardiologists, God bless them, are not most of the time the people I want to talk to, because we're not doing anything with arrhythmias. And the challenge with the cardiologists is they've been trained for decades to think of ECG as arrhythmias. And so it's really hard for them to think of ECG as having anything to do with blood pressure, which we actually do have something to do with. And so it's usually a tear down their assumptions kind of conversation to get through that. Whereas other folks are a little less convinced that they understand how it must work. And then instead they're a little bit more open-minded that it could be something new, it could be something different. So those are some of the kinds of interesting things. You did allude to, Jean, the fact that there's always ups and downs, right? And I've shut down companies, I've sold companies, I've had companies go zombie, and I think that Fifth Eye is right on the cusp of breakout, which is exciting. But 2022 is our year we got our product that we wanted to take to the market cleared in December of 2021. And this is the year where we're going to go into pilots. We're going to try and get our first sales. This is a huge transitional year. And this has turned into the year of Jen having neurosurgery. We have notes from January where I say things to my colleagues like, I have a blazing headache. Well, we didn't figure out until March that I actually had tumors in my head. And May 10th, I had them removed. And so you're seeing me today, 15 weeks post-neurosurgery. I have a 9-inch scar in my hair, by the way. And that meant that I had to take a big medical leave right in the middle of 2 of our pilots. And it was just not in the plan. How do you deal with the curveball that's not in the plan? And how do you have a team that can respond to that? And how do you manage that process with your investors? And how do you get through all of those things? I would never in a zillion years have thought that was going to be the defining feature of 2022 for me. But I'm hoping that by Christmas, I won't have headaches anymore, and that we will have passed through this transition into going to market and have our paying customers in hand despite that. And that's part of, what does it mean to have some challenges in the marketplace? One of the challenges is when essentially your European competitors drop their costs by 50% and wipe out your competitive advantage. That was a really painful challenge. One of the other ones is all of a sudden you find out that you have this mass in your head and you had no idea that you could ever have a brain tumor, and then somebody wants to cut open your head. Are you crazy? This is nuts. And then and you have your partners who are saying things, can you call me from the hospital? And you find out later they want to know if you're still in there. And I'm like, seriously? They're like, yeah, I just wanted to know you were still there. I'm like, wow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not sure I would really want to know that. By the way, those of you who know me, I'm still here and I'm still me. But that was a real question. And we didn't know. I was at University of Michigan, thank goodness, with the chair of neurosurgery there. And I was, under anesthesia for 12 hours. It's a long surgery.
Wow,
And
that's incredible.
that was pretty scary. It was pretty crazy. But the crazy thing is now I know of a number of other startup CEOs who've gone through similar things. I know of startups where the CEO died of COVID. I know of startups where, the leadership had to deal with other kinds of surgeries, which were in much less positive prognosis than I had. So these are things that happen, and real life happens. And I've had challenges where we've had multiple people in my startups, this is going to sound just terrible, die. And what do you do when you find out all of a sudden, out of the blue, one of your team members dies? That is a experience I sadly have had multiple times. And that is just, totally comes out of the blue. And it makes me maybe a little more willing to have conversations like, exactly who has the passwords to that, whatever it is? And who is the backup for this? I think these things are probably a lot more now than I did at the beginning of my startup career.
It's kind of amazing. They all blend together into this landscape of things that you now know to look for and to be aware of as you go through. Thank you for sharing that story, Jen. It's amazing, and we're all very glad you're here. And actually, it reminds me, when you say you walk into things that you don't know about, when you say that, I always feel like it's a disarming tactic, because you obviously are one of the most knowledgeable, capable, and technically capable people, all the way from your roots. When you said you started studying programming, it reminds me of one of our staff at Intu, being Adrienne Harris. Whenever she says, "I have no idea what I'm doing," you always know to just get out of the way, because it's that deconstruction. It's that you have to deconstruct the situation to build back up your knowledge. So by the point she's said, "I have no idea what I'm doing," she knows she's already 50% of the way further than you are, because you think you know what you're doing and you're wrong about it. So it's that I think I'm gonna put you in that same mental space there, which is when you say
there's only one problem with that, Gene, is I think that my solution isn't necessarily that I've got it all figured out, but that I have the opportunity to learn and hire people that are smarter than me in so many areas. Because the other master skill is seeing where people's talents are and letting them blossom into those talents. This neurosurgery thing there's a little tiny story that you might find interesting. And by the way, my blog, there's a section on it on neurosurgery. So if anybody wants to know more about what that journey has been like, I have 4 blog posts on that subject. But here's the crazy thing. I don't know when I'm going to have neurosurgery. It's as soon as possible, as soon as they can get me on the schedule. So we have just a few weeks to figure this out. My VP of engineering, the introvert, who would prefer to engage with the keyboard rather than with people if he has his druthers, but has also been at my side at every pilot site and has been on all the commercial things. I put him in charge of our commercial efforts while I went on medical leave. And people thought I was nuts. But I also knew that he had the raw talent and ability to move outside his comfort zone and deal with and problem solve in a really amazing way. And that's some of the kind of crazy stuff you do in startups, is you find people that are broadly brilliant and capable and willing to get out of their comfort zone. Because I don't think when you live in startups, you can stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah, that's
if you want to be in your comfort zone, go someplace where things are a lot more steady. Startups are not that place.
It's not the place for it. Thank you for those stories, Jen. It's absolutely amazing. We are so glad that you're here. I want to give some time back to Dr. Lipka on this question of problems solved in the current thing. We heard a good bit about Fifth Eye and some of the challenges they've had to solve. artificial intelligence, machine learning, and FDA, and a university that doesn't know how they want to deal with these topics and just charging headlong into it. You guys at TSRL have a very unique model, one that I'd like to learn more about actually, even after today, because it resonates very much with how we've seen the world. Tell us, though, about what kinds of problems and solutions are you getting to work on, sort of in the same vein that Jen has been talking about Fifth Eye. What are some of the unique things that you're getting to confront as a company?
Yeah, so they're in some ways quite similar. So we've branched out now into the drug device combination product space. We're developing a single patch for flu treatment, and moving into manufacturing. And they're just when you take things from a research scale to the next level of scaling, just the weirdest things that you never anticipate will happen. So our microneedles are made from a hydrogel cross-linked polymer. And, all of a sudden at larger scale, we started to have bubbles everywhere, and things that shapes like meniscuses and just things that you don't see when you do it on a smaller scale. And, you pull in people. We pulled in people from a packaging company, people that polymer chemists, material science people that do biomimicry and try to design new things with all kinds of different materials. We've been working with a very flexible and great local CRO, also from our former Pfizer days, Valesco, which is now part of Pace Analytical, and we've stayed within our timeline solving those problems. Regulatory strategy, same thing. There is no approved microneedle product for drug delivery on the market yet. What is the regulatory path? Again, a lot of interactions with the FDA. We got accepted into their emerging technology program, so we can have more frequent interactions. And then thinking about new product opportunities. So the needles don't have drug. The drug is behind it in the patch. So once the needles are ready for clinical evaluation, you can very rapidly add new products to the portfolio. So we're looking at cancer. We're looking at incontinence. We're looking at even a patch for COVID, something for lung infection. So there's lots of commercial challenges to evaluate and to make decisions which product candidate to pick. And I think then there's always people challenges. So we've not only, I said earlier, we've worked in infectious diseases predominantly. So we got the majority of our funding typically from Fauci's Institute. And when COVID hit, everybody wanted money from Fauci, right? So our niche kind of window was closing. And, a lot of our folks had all kinds of COVID soul searching decisions that they made. Two people left town. Some person decided she wanted to work for her church. One person decided she was going to retire and travel. And so we actually lost 2/3 of our folks last year, and we had to completely rebuild the team, which we did now. And we're pretty excited about the new folks that we have. But as I said, some of us have been working 10, 15 years together, and we could read each other's mind. To get new people, you've got to rebuild that and build those relationships and get those, nonverbal cues communication going.
That's amazing. It sounds like just in the last 15 minutes between you and Jen, we've got quite the list of all the things that can happen over the course of a career managing people. Not to reiterate the list, but some of them can be pretty sad, and you still have to move forward as a company and as individuals, right? Like we have to keep the boat going forward. Wow, that's amazing. Wow, I can't believe we're already at the top of the hour here. I want to go for like 3 hours, but this is always so much fun. Just a quick note here. A friend known to the community, Diane Bowie, says, Jen, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're still with us. So that's from Diane. She passes that on. Let me ask you both this as we come here to the top of the hour and our time comes to a close. Like I said at the outset, one of the demographics that we really want to just shine a spotlight on and give just give some vision for is to the young woman who may be sort of considering, which way do I want to go with my career? What do I want to do? I know it's very important that if you see somebody who's kind of like you and they're doing something that you think you might like to aspire to, the difference between seeing that it could be possible and not having that vision, just to have that picture in your mind, like, oh, there's a person I might be able to follow in their footsteps. If you could just now for 30 seconds say something to that young woman who may be watching this today or later on YouTube, what would you say? Let's start with Dr. Lipka.
I found throughout my career that the biggest enemy to having a vision and pursuing that vision is usually between your own two ears. And, you know, having that courage and the willingness to misbehave, right? You've heard this quote, well-behaved women never make history, right? So misbehave outside the norm of what people expect you to do, how they, in particular, women expect to align with expectations and always more support rather than lead. Push those boundaries if you see something that you're really interested in and believe in yourself that you can achieve it.
Jen, your thoughts?
Before I was CEO of the first company I led, I had an investor tell me, you can't be the CEO, you're a woman. I had VCs in Boston who panicked because I was a woman. That is real. It does happen. But I'm also a rebel. And I don't really care when people tell me that I can't do something. In fact, that just makes me mad and makes me want to do it in spite of them, to spite them. So that's my motivator. A lot of times is, you know, my husband says, the best way to get Jen to do something is tell her she can't. And that does work for me. But the advice that I would give to anybody who is thinking about where they want to go, including younger women, I think you should think very hard about what makes your heart sing. My heart sings leading people and going where no one else has gone before. I love that. I love being out in the gray space. I love making decisions under pressure. I'm really comfortable in those spaces. And that's what makes my heart sing. And I love proving people wrong when they doubt me. But that's not everybody. And I think that knowing yourself and thinking very carefully about what do you know about yourself? And looking for the thing that makes your heart sing, that's what I look for when I'm hiring people. It's try and figure out what is it that makes their heart sing. And then I try and match them into a role that's going to be that for them. And I think that that's true across the board. I do not think most people want to be CEOs. It's kind of a crazy path. And I've worked with many people who are like, they get close to my job and they're like, I don't want your job. So while I would love to have them be excited to follow in my footsteps, I think they should be more excited to follow in the spirit of the footsteps, which is figuring out what makes your heart sing. I knew what made my heart sing in high school, and it continued to be true. But I have a wonderful partner who would hate this, doesn't want to be in the spotlight, doesn't want to be out in the front, would much prefer to have 80 or 90% confidence rather than 48% confidence, which is always the number he picks. You'll make a decision on 48% confidence, Jen, and he's right. I will. And I will bet the company on it sometimes. And he's not comfortable there. And that's good to know, because he shouldn't try to do what I do. He should do what he does superbly well, supremely well. And that's really comes down to looking for what makes your heart sing. And you have to figure that out. I have a daughter who is going to be a forensic scientist. She likes blood spatter, fingerprints, and skulls. I mean, go figure. And she wants to be in a lab all by herself doing DNA stuff. And that's really cool. And she preferred to skip the people part if she can help it. And I've got another daughter who is a fourth-year medical student who wants to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. You know what? You got to have a certain amount of ego to cut people's hearts and to deal with the fact that many of your patients are going to die. And yet nobody is happier than she is being in the OR with blood all over her face. And then that's a little graphic, but that's what she comes home looking like right now. And you just sit there, and that makes her heart sing. And neither one of my daughters want to be me. But what they do want to be is quintessentially them. And I just think that we do ourselves a disservice when we let other people define who we are and who we want to be. And instead, we should figure out what is it that makes you really happy. And to go back to that computer science thing, I had a job back in high school again, where I was programming, using all those skills programming. And I was in a basement of a real estate firm writing programs, and I hated every minute of it because I like people, and there were no people, and it was horrible. And I realized at that moment I should never be a computer programmer. So now I'm running a tech company as a CEO. I get to spend all my time with my people, and I get to play with computers. It's great.
And the programming is still there. I love it.
The programming is still there, and I still get to learn about weird React errors, but I don't have to fix them.
It's always a good thing. Oh, thank you both for those sentiments. I know I'm very thankful to my parents, both of whom defied expectations on their own careers and always welcomed me to challenge things. To my mother, especially, who was one of the first women in the math department at Princeton, got her PhD in statistics under John Tukey and Frederick Mosteller. So I was privileged to grow up with the assumption that there weren't any boundaries, and come to be surprised that much of society that's not true. So I'm thankful to my parents, and in light of this series, to my mom and her and to her example. And I'm going to turn the spotlight last today to Denise. I'm very thankful for Dr. Lipka and Jen Baird being with us today. Just amazing capstone on our discussion, these four episodes. We're going to do something next year, Denise, but I want to leave you with the last word, and maybe a little bit of your own story, even if we run over a minute or two, that you might like to share. And also, what's your word for the main audience here that we really want? If there's a young lady watching who wants to know, I love how Jen said it, like maybe not my story exactly, but the principle here, the finding what your passion is. Where would you like to leave us with this, Denise?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jen and Elke. I loved the stories. And Jean, you're right. These conversations always go so quickly. I could just sit and listen for another 3 hours. But we can't do that another time for sure. I resonated with both Elke and Jen. I think growing up, I was a first-gen college student. Grew up in a blue-collar community area. But my parents gave me just the pathway of being who I wanted to be. And back in high school, as Jen will reference, it was always, and even in college, what is your 3-year plan? What is your 5-year plan? And I really hated those exercises because I felt like I had to decide. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to do what was meaningful to me, what I was having fun doing. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning new things. I love hanging out with the tech people and, learning through osmosis and figuring things out. So that was always my mantra. I have a great baseline degree in accounting, which kind of gives me a great foundation, and experience in sales, marketing, all kinds of things that have given me an opportunity to work with a lot of really cool, smart people and do some really neat things and help a lot of people. I enjoy helping and connecting people and doing things like this to bring those forward that will travel in our paths.
Well, we appreciate your leadership in this and all you're doing with MEDC, and thanks to MEDC for partnering on this series. Just been so exciting. Looking forward to next year. We're going to do something. I don't know what next year's series in partnership with MEDC is going to be, but it's going to be equally as awesome. Again, thank you, Denise. Thank you, Jen Baird. Thank you, Dr. Elke Lipka, for your time today and for what a wonderful capstone on this Women Who Innovate series. We'll be back with MedTech Crossroads next week. But thank you for joining us for this very special series. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Talk soon.
Thank you for having us.